Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sanctum YouTube channel. Today, we're doing another AFL preview for the 2023 season. We're talking about West Coast Eagles today, and I've got two very special guests that are joining me. I've got Lachlan Dennis. Scotty, it's very good to have you.
Yep, great to be here.
And Lockie Dan, it's good to have your face on again for the West Coast preview.
Yeah, good to be back. Good to be back always.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a bit of West Coast. Not a lot has happened in their pre-season, which is probably a good thing considering West Coast have been in and around the news of over the last couple of years, but they've had a pretty successful pre-season, minimal injuries, not a lot happening. We'll talk about the ins and outs in a second, but Scotty, what's your original thoughts coming into 2023 for the West Coast Eagles?
Well, in previous years, they've had their down years, and for whatever reason, they don't stay down for too long. So as much as you think, they finished bottom 2 or 3, whatever it is, it wouldn't surprise me if, they bounce back pretty quick and sort of jump up the ladder a fair bit. So if I was a supporter, I'd certainly be optimistic for sure.
Definitely. Dan, what is your thoughts originally coming in for West Coast this year?
I don't think they'll be as disappointing as they were last year, which was very un-West Coast-like. Even just when they lost games in Perth, like, obviously you're not going to win all of them, but you just don't expect to see West Coast lose games in Perth. This just doesn't happen. But yeah, as you said, Scott, they don't like to be down the bottom for too long, and they're a big club in Western Australia, so they will be wanting to climb back up the ladder very quickly, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I think the ins and outs probably prove that they want to probably build this a bit slower than just jumping back up at the ladder, because they haven't traded a lot in. There's been a lot of draft picks that have come through, and I think they're prepared for that. The exclusion from that conversation is probably Jaden Hunt coming in from Melbourne as a free agent. Gives him a lot of pace, gives him a lot of speed around the contest, but also a bit of skill as well, which I think they probably lacked in stages last year, that explosion out of the contest. So I think, Scotty, that's a pretty good pickup for them.
Yeah, so yeah, he's you're right. Watching them last year, they just looked slow, particularly on the outside. Like Andrew Gaff not getting any younger, and yeah, they were just very slow moving that ball. So well and truly a good pickup. Hopefully, you get a game or two.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dan as well. Like, they haven't lost too much. Josh Kennedy obviously retiring. Zach Langdon got delisted along with Patrick Naish, Jackson Nelson. Jack Redden retired, who I was surprised played that many amount of games. I didn't even know he did when he got to the milestone. And then the big one, Junior Rioli leaving to Port Adelaide. How do you feel about that for West Coast? I think Junior Rioli being traded was sort of a surprise for them in a sense, but I think their outs aren't as bad as what they seem.
Yeah, well, when they made that trade, when the rumour first came through, I just sort of brushed it off because I thought he'd just re-sign. And when he went, I was a little bit surprised. They're going through a bit of they are going through a rebuild. So you sort of have to work out if you're not going to sort of be here for the next premiership, or if you're not, and you're sort of in the prime of your career, which I guess you could say he is. You sort of might be happy to part ways with him and see if you can get a young kid up forward. As you said, the speed of Jaden Hunt will be a big addition. One trade that did surprise me that they were happy to be involved in was the Jason Horn-Francis mega trade, which I know you're very familiar with the deals of that trade, in which they traded their pick 2 or pick 3.
I've seen the contract. That's how deep I was into that.
You're in the meeting room.
I was signing it for him.
Yeah, so I was a bit surprised to see them part ways with that early pick they had, but I think they'll be happy because they still had their top 10 pick, and they got some picks around the top 20 as well. So yeah, they still are in their rebuilding phase, but we'll see. Hopefully, some better signs from Coasters this year.
You mentioned the draft. They've had 3 picks in the top 30, which is normally a pretty good sign for a rebuilding club. Ruben Ginby, Harry Barnett, and Kobe Burgill. They've all come through. And a lot of Category B rookies as well. Noah Long and Elijah Hewitt, which is one I forgot. So they actually had 4 picks inside the top 30, and he was at pick 14, who I think out of all of those, and I know they got Ruben Yimby at pick 9. I think a lot of West Coast fans are excited about Elijah, which it's one they targeted. I think, to my surprise, he slipped quite a bit, Scotty.
Yeah, I'm part of a huge West Coast family, and they've talked him up. And number 9 is in Gimby or Gibney. I find it hard to say. So,
Gimby.
Yeah, that's the name. Those two names I just got endlessly in my ear all summer. So there are high expectations on those two. They've been training amazingly. Apparently, in round 1, they're hoping both play. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Dan, one thing that West Coast fans will probably be excited about is the trial matches to see and showcase these young talents. And play Port Adelaide next in a couple of weeks. I think when this is recorded, they'll probably be playing or played already. But there's a lot of promising signs for the young talent. And I think that they almost, and Oscar Allen is the other one as well, who's developing really nicely. So I think a lot of positive signs for West Coast to take out of their preseason as a whole.
Yeah, and I will give him a shout out because he is a big fan of the Inner Sanctum, and I did spend a bit of time with him at uni before he was drafted. Harry Barnett is a big fan, so shout out to him if he's tuning in. I am very excited to see him play because, as we know, Nick Nat is a superstar. He's not getting any younger. So, yeah, they'll be looking for a ruckman very soon, and no better time to test him in a trial game than in a trial game and in WA. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes. Jai Cully's another one. I think that's how you say his last name, that they got in the he was pick number 1 in the mid-season draft last year, and he showed some signs, but I think with the full AFL preseason under his belt, and Adam Simpson working him pretty hard, he wouldn't have had the best summer of his life, but it'll pay dividends for him. I think I was pretty excited by his highlights package when he first signed up with them.
Yeah, definitely, and it's good to see. I think West Coast. I think the only negative from their preseason is the recent injury to Jack Darling, which I've heard is quite serious. So it's not great news, but I think again, we talk about those players that are coming through the system for West Coast, and if there's a spot there that probably needs to be proven long term, it's Darling's spot. So it could be a good opportunity, even though you don't want to see that. So. A lot to be desired for West Coast, so we'll jump into the questionnaire for them. How do you judge the club's preseason overall, Scott?
Well, I mean, compared to last year, where half of them couldn't get on the park and there was COVID, they just simply just didn't recover. So, playing all those supplementary players, and apparently quite a few of them, the COVID actually hit them pretty hard. So you imagine sort of not having a preseason of sorts, and it took them until halfway through the year before they started looking all right. So in comparison, proper preseason, fit and firing, I think they should come out looking much better. So
yeah, I'm very much interested to see how that goes. Dan, how did you find the West Coast preseason?
Well, we have mentioned it on the Gold Coast preview that we have recorded as well. But again, no news is almost good news. As you said, they had a shocker preseason last year. It almost felt like you'd open social media each day and find a new player getting injured. Jack Darling is going to be a loss, especially with Kennedy gone. There's a gaping hole in the forward line. So someone like Oscar Allen will need to stand up and have a good year, regardless if Darling's there or not, because they'll need a second key forward. But I'd assume that just fans would be looking for a big improvement in skills and fitness as well. They got shown up a little bit in that facet last year, which is why they finished bottom 2. So, just sort of back to footy basics, I think. And, they'll be pretty happy to not see their players coming down with a new injury each day this year.
We'll say that now, but it's not March
It is
yet.
mid-February now.
Just keep the fingers crossed for West Coast fans. Both of you, I'll get the thoughts on a must pick for a fantasy Supercoach pick. So I'll start with you, Scotty.
All the buzz is Elliot Yeo. So he was a ball magnet when he was not fit and firing, and last year just a write-off in terms of injuries and couldn't get going. So he's cheaper, he's fit, he's the one, I reckon.
Dan, have you got one?
Yeah, he is a bit of a veteran nowadays, which sometimes in these sorts of fantasy and super coach games, it can work in your favour. Shannon Hearn, 2022 fantasy average of 93. Sometimes when players get a little bit older, they're happy to just sit around the back line and just play a bit of kick to catch, and that is that is very much a happy thing for fantasy coaches, because if they're happy to just get the stats up all day, then they'll churn out some big scores. So Shannon Hearn would be one that you could probably keep an eye on.
I can't believe he's still running around. He just keeps
Yeah,
going.
no.
I thought he retired. He's a machine. Just keeps going. Just getting those cheapies in the back line.
Yep.
I don't think there's a bloke in the AFL at the moment that's had more 1-year contract extensions than him at the moment. It's
He
going
wants to break
absolutely.
Sean Burgoyne's record.
Yeah, literally. Dan, what's one change that needs to be made at West Coast this year?
I think just the ability to win close contests. They had a few games last year. I actually remember one quite vividly against the Crows in Perth, and another one was Geelong in Perth, where they almost won both of those games, but it was just the ability to win close contests, and obviously the main scoreboard, but winning close contests with tackling and whatnot, finding a match winner as well. So again, improvement in fitness will help with that. But yeah, I think and if you start to win a couple of those games, then you get a few more wins on the ladder, and all of a sudden you're at 13th, 14th, which is actually really good for a rebuilding side and gives fans a lot of hope.
Definitely. Scotty, what are you most excited for West Coast this year?
I reckon Oscar Allen didn't play last year. I reckon seeing him up forward, we've touched on him before, but as a Geelong fan, a couple of years ago, we were asking about him, and I was pretty keen for him to come across. So if he's fit and firing, and he should be clanking a few down there, that's for sure. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. It's a big year for who, Dan, this year for West Coast?
Tom Barrass,
Yes.
Premiership player, obviously in 2018. With Luke Shuey sort of starting to be on the way out, can Tom make a big audition as potential West Coast captain? He actually had a really good year last year, particularly in the back end as they started to get things going. He wins a lot of footy, takes a lot of marks. He's a strong leader down back. So they'll be wanting him to step it up again this year and go hard again. He does have a lot of pressure on him down back. They, especially last year, they conceded a lot of inside 50s. So, he's a big player for them and an important one too.
Who is it a breakout year for, Scotty?
Good question. No, this is gonna sound silly, but I feel like it's a breakout year for Liam Ryan. That is gonna sound silly because he was All Australian a couple of years ago.
I've rate that.
But I reckon he, like the rest of them, I reckon he was almost non-existent last year. It felt like I just felt like you used to just seeing him jumping up all the time, but I don't reckon I hardly saw him. Maybe I'm just wasn't watching enough, but I reckon he needs to get back to All Australian type levels for them to be successful. So
I completely agree with that. And another one would be Nick Nat, because he hasn't had a breakout year since 2015, I reckon. So
he's lost some weight apparently. He's fit and firing. He's leaner than he's ever been. That's what I've been told. Word on the grapevine.
You can insert player name here with the rest of that sentence for anyone in a preseason report.
Spot on.
All right, this is my favourite question of this questionnaire. It is a headline you'll see, and you boys didn't disappoint me in the Gold Coast one, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got for the West Coast one. So, Scotty, we'll start with you. What's your headline you'll see for West Coast?
Well, I actually think there's half a chance, even if they're just going okay, that you might get the headline along the lines of West Coast looking for a new coach. I think that he's under the pump. And I hope, like we've talked them up and we're optimistic that they'll jump up, but if they don't, that headline, I reckon the drums will be beating for sure.
Yeah, the Eagle will be crying out, Dan. What is your headline?
You won't actually believe it, but I've actually got pretty well the same one written down. Needing a new leader of the Nest because the coach is on the way.
much better than
I
mine.
think he is the first coach to leave his position this year. They haven't. Well, they missed finals in 2021. They were first round exits in a home final, which was a rarity in 2020. Not a lot of teams had a home final, and they did have one. And they got beaten. Obviously, really poor last year. Maybe they'll be looking, do we need a new set of fresh ideas? And Justin Langer on the board might give him a tap on the shoulder.
He is their
Justin
premiership.
Langer coaching.
He is their premiership coach, though, so I think they love him.
Yeah, true.
So it'll take a lot to go wrong, but you never know. Things change quickly.
I've seen a lot of plugs pulled from the bathtub, and I reckon that's definitely one that could be the case on that front. What's one game that is a must-watch for West Coast this year, Dan?
Round 11, they take on the Bombers at Optus Stadium. Didn't have a lot of wins last year, West Coast. I think it was only 2 or 3, but one of those was Essendon. And they generally, Essendon West Coast is actually usually a pretty good game. So they played a final in 2019 against Bombers at Optus, and yeah, they're actually usually a pretty good game. So that one, I think West Coast fans will be hoping for a bit of a. There's not too many games they'll be wanting to repeat of last year, but that might be one of them.
Scotty, what's yours?
I always go for the round 1-1, mate. So if
I was going to say, yeah,
they've got North Melbourne at Marvel. If that one goes pear shaped, watch out. But that's the one they should be looking forward to, and seeing the new West Coast come out fit and firing. And they should, if they're good enough, if they're fit, they should take care of North Melbourne, surely. So all West Coast fans will be looking forward to that one for sure.
1:15 on a Saturday is not a great time, but
it's 1:45, mate. 1:45, but yeah.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, I'm going South Australian time, which is overruled in this chat right now.
Yeah.
North Melbourne v West Coast at Marvel at 1:15 South Australian time.
Well, if you get there half an hour early, then.
If you get there half an hour earlier, Dan, it's almost breakfast time at Macca's. Like I'm talking, not even all day breakfast. So
yeah, well, round 3 they've got the derby on a Sunday afternoon. So there's another one for you. They're always huge.
So they've got a good start. I mean, they've got North, they've got GWS, and then Fremantle. GWS obviously taking a step back with Adam Kingsley, and North Melbourne away from home. If they're 2-0 and they're going in against Freo at home,
be ripper.
I mean, could be good. But what's a minimum expectation, Scotty, for West Coast this year?
They would have their sights set on the 8. As silly as that sounds, I think that's what they'd be expecting internally. I think if they can win 6 or 7 games, I reckon that's a good pass for sure.
Dan, are you the same?
Yeah, look, generally, I know it all too well at the moment with the rebuilding club. Generally, a pass mark is 6 wins, and I reckon West Coast will be looking for 6 wins. I reckon you could put probably 4 or 5 of those in Perth. They'll try and make Optus a fortress again, where we all hate going to Perth to play the Eagles. And they might pick up a couple on the road. They love playing at Adelaide Oval. They should win round 1 in Melbourne. So, yeah, 6 wins.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think anything more than 6 wins is just an absolute A+ season. Mm-hmm. Anything less, it depends. It's a lot to be desired, but get to that 5 or 6 mark, and they're pretty good stead for the next couple of years after that. So, where are they finishing on the ladder, though, Scotty?
Let's say 13th, the best of the bottom 6, I reckon. So, yeah, that's be pretty good.
Dan?
15th, which is a big improvement from 17th to 15th. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is when you're languishing down the bottom. So, yeah, 15th for me this year.
Yeah, I was about 16th. I think that 6-win mark seems to be the new low for anyone that's hitting that 15th to 12th range. And anything more. We've seen how competitive the competition is now, that no matter how low you are, you always have a sniff on game day. So, for West Coast fans that are watching, I think have a lot of belief, because you just never know. We've seen a lot of turnarounds come quickly. Collingwood last year, is a perfect example. So you just never know. But
Yep.
that's the West Coast preview, and I thank Lachlan and Scott for joining me.
Yeah, good to be back. And
Thanks, mate.
yeah.
Shout out to my 2 favourite West Coast fans out there who'll watch it for sure.
Oh, beautiful. We love you, West Coast fans. We hope you jump on board and subscribe to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel. Check out all the other AFL previews that have come ready for a big 2023 season. It's not too far away. So we're very much keen as footy fans. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.